Yeah, there we are.
Right. There was a bit of a hum on the background, which now vanished, which is good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, no, it's like a sort of silent studio at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. It's all the technology surrounding Lars which makes the hum.
All right, okay.
Very good. So, Catherine, what are you going to do with the your belongings? Are you going to take everything with you to the US, or
Some
do
things.
you rent a warehouse somewhere?
I'm going to start now, by the way. Well, hello, everybody. I'm so pleased that you're listening to this session, which is what comes after digitization. Now, that may sound like an absurd question because it's so all embracing, but nevertheless, I've got two people here who couldn't be better at having a conversation about this. One is Catherine Styler, who's the CEO of Creative Commons. And if you don't know it, you should. It's an unbelievable global organization. And the other person is Jarmo Eskalainen, who's been around the block on this open source data world for many, many years. He was head of Forum Virium, perhaps the best city lab in the world nowadays, seen as that. Part of Future Cities Catapult, innovation officer there, chief innovation officer. And now he's running data-driven innovation for the University of Edinburgh, but it's much more than that. It's about the whole region. So they're going to have a conversation. I'm going to drop out. They know more than me, and I'd love to hear what they're going to talk about.
Very good. Thank you, Charles. And we have 24 minutes to crack the topic, which is a bit much. While discussing the framework for this, it was clear that it's impossible to actually discuss in full about what comes after digitalization in a day, because it ranges from future of content and ownership to future of work to future of democracy and actually future of climate and the planet. So instead of trying to do all of that, we thought of focusing on the core ingredients of this sort of a public-private partnerships, and how should the fair deal on digitalization be managed? How can we reach the equilibrium where the privacy, public good, and commercial interests are in balance in the world? Because I guess it's fair to say that at the moment there's quite a struggle, and we are not seeing a balanced environment when it comes for digitalization, and certainly there's room for improvement there. I thought of starting though by giving a bit of floor space to both of us to just to check the kind of a background, the bottom line from the starting point for the topic from your viewpoint. And Catherine, of course, besides running Creative Commons, you have a history in the open data, the open landscape of digitalization, and you have a significant background in politics, which makes you a perfect person to join the creative bureaucracy festival, because you know both the downsides and the upsides of driving change from the decision maker point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that sound, Catherine?
That sounds great, Jarmo, and it's so nice to. Jarmo and I first met when I was at the Open Knowledge Foundation, and he was a board member. So it's lovely to be able to have this conversation with you. Can't think of a better person.
Great. And actually, for the purpose of this conversation, just to blur it out bluntly, I think the Creative Commons is a best practice model,
Yeah.
which could form a blueprint for a much wider set of activities, which would build a more fair and transparent future for the digital domain. That's something I would like to discuss with you.
Well, I think that Creative Commons is such an amazing organisation movement. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, and that allows for a moment of reflection about what's happened in the past 20 years, where we are at this moment, and where we're going for the next. And our new strategy really is kind of addressing both our ability in terms of advocacy and thinking about innovation, but also thinking about capacity building. But the theme of our new strategy, which I think is really important, is better sharing. We dealt with the issue about field sharing, with the innovation that came from, Larry Lessig, Hal Abelson, Jamie Boyle, who created this organisation, to now where we are thinking about how can we do this better. And I think, the responsibility that we see at Creative Commons in terms of how our licenses enable the open web, how we ensure that people have access to knowledge and culture wherever they are in the world. And that's what's the amazing beauty of Creative Commons, is its global reach and our global community and network. So I do think you have a point there, Jarmo. I'm not sure whether yesterday was my year anniversary as CEO of Creative Commons, and I think we've come a long way from in a year, and we've still got a long way to go with our strategy, but we're making those steps. And I think you're right that the model that we have, that's community, and also the tool that we've created that's free to use with that human, technical and legal layers that beautifully come together, is an example of how we addressed a pressing problem and still address a pressing problem of access to knowledge and culture, and how we can have a model online that is able and accessible to all.
Yeah, very good. So from the data-driven innovation program point of view, we are of course massively interested in the work which you do. In a nutshell, DDI is a program coordinated by the University of Edinburgh, but it's a collaborative effort. It's a relatively massive 15-year initiative with a budget of over £600 million. We are building a network of innovation hubs in Edinburgh. We are working across 10 industry sectors with the companies, small and large, driving digital and data skills in the region and in the world. Supporting entrepreneurship and both smaller and bigger companies in reaping the benefits from data innovation, but also with the key aspiration to support an environment of doing data right. What's the fair deal on data? Because we don't have that model yet. We kind of have the two opposite ends in a very corporate-driven US model, and then the increasingly authoritative government-driven models endorsed by China especially. But there must be a third way, which sort of recognizes that the balance between privacy, public good, and corporate interests is a win-win-win deal. Everybody benefits if there's a trusted environment on data. And at the moment, people don't really trust what we do with data, and that will be a showstopper for business as well. So I'm keen to study opportunities to have models which address policymaking in a more nuanced way than blunt, big legislative packages. And I think Creative Commons is one of the ways which has shown that it's possible to combine legally binding frameworks which also understand the technological landscape they work in.
I think when Larry Lessig started, I think they thought it would be an American, solution, and then the global community built because it was addressing a global issue. And I think the wonderful thing about Creative Commons is its global reach, its global nature. But at the moment, across the world, legislators are making decisions in a very national mindset.
Yes.
And I think that's a big challenge for us in wanting to make sure that we can have knowledge and culture shared equitably across the world. So that's one challenge. And I think the other challenge that you have is that people just like when I was a politician in the European Parliament, when we were starting to have these data debates, and that was my journey into Creative Commons, was working on copyright reform, is that it's such a changing environment, and there is a real lack of understanding some of the very basics, not because people don't want to, but the nature of when you're in a very high-paced environment, having to make decisions and choices. You're in that conciliation committee in the European, Parliament. You're trying to do the deal. And it's very hard sometimes to see the wood from the trees. And my worry is that the legislative decade that's ahead of us are going to make decisions which are going to entrench the power that is already there, rather than thinking of really digging deep in alternative models. And those
Yeah.
alternative models need to be, kind of almost globally brought together. The other missing bit, I think, within some of the decision making is really where civil society's voice is, because you've got the lobbies from different, I remember in copyright it was the music industry and the publishing lobby, and we had to create a lobby to defend library interests. And that takes me to an interesting point as well, that often the debate that you hear is what's illegal offline should be illegal online, absolutely. But then what's legal offline should be legal online, which is really important when you think about the case for libraries and sharing knowledge. And so there's a tricky balance to be struck. But I think you can have that balance of progress and privacy. And I think you can do that well. But you have to have all of the people at the table, not just the vested interests. I think your lab at Edinburgh is a wonderful example of bringing local government, national government, the UK government. When we were in the European Union, it was Europe as well, Jarmo. And I think I think there's something wonderful.
I'm from Scotland anyway.
But it's a wonderful model of how you can do things practically and affect change and bring this world, which can be quite alien and quite, people are very fearful of some of the things we talk about, and breaking that fearfulness is so important to gain trust.
So if we would concentrate on the kind of a utopian future in 15 years, because there's a dystopian version in which case, we have the increasingly massive corporations which are closed boxes and increasingly authoritarian governments, and they both burn the coal to run their digital world. So let's not discuss that. It's too gloomy. Let's trust that we will see the positive future in which the combination of technological and societal innovations have built a landscape where the humankind is able to collectively join forces to crack some of the pressing challenges and the wicked problems we have, which is transparent and fair, in which we understand what's being done to our data, and we can control what's being done to our data collectively and individually. If that's the preferred future, and we certainly know that different countries and parts of the world are in very different stages regarding such a future, and it's not necessarily endorsed by everybody. But anyway, let's imagine that that's the direction we would like to see the travel going. Could we discuss some of the things which need to happen in order for that to happen? Maybe if we discuss sort of a technological development, business models, and the then regulatory government innovations. Could we maybe focus for the last chunk to focus on the what needs to happen, in 5 years, 10 years in order to get to that point?
I think interoperability is a key point in this, because if you can, if we want to be successful in this, we need, we discussed this when I worked with you when I was at Open Knowledge, but it's how data talks to data. How do we? And sometimes it's not just it's a mindset of sharing, as you know, from the open science world, and we're trying to do that differently. But that mindset shift, that sharing is important if we're going to address the pressing problems of our world. Now I think maybe that's a key thing to show buy-in about how what we would do in terms of sharing and interoperability will solve, and that there's a culture change just now amongst the students you'll see at Edinburgh, and I see in my role as chair at St Andrews, is that people are really looking at being mission driven and thinking about their values first and foremost and what they're going to do in their lives. And I think this is an opportunity, but we've got to give people skills to be able to use data in a comfortable way, be able to understand the challenges, and we see the bias, kind of debate that we want to address when we want effective artificial intelligence, not one that is going to create more social problems, one that's going to create social good, and we can see some of that in the health sector. So I think your point about how do we get that balance, and in the next 5, 10, 15 years, where will that be? We don't have a crystal ball to be able, but what we would like to see is that we would see that balance between progress and privacy. We would see interoperability and people having choices and being able to make decision making, empowerment. And we'd also be able to see skills in terms of people being able to use their skill sets in the different domains that they're working in to be able to affect change that will
Yeah,
ultimately make a better society. I think that's maybe where my thinking is at the
yeah.
moment.
The I do agree with the. First of all, I do honestly believe in the tech entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
Who,
yeah, yeah,
who wouldn't? Who's been working in the domain? I mean, the
yeah,
companies starting from garage have been one of the dominant
yeah,
forces changing the landscape, changing the planet in the recent decade or two. However, tech entrepreneurship seems to be changing. So that's something we
yeah,
see on the ground in
yeah,
Edinburgh and maybe especially in the European startup scene. That the
yeah,
millennials, they are indeed genuinely purpose driven. I mean,
yes,
they
yeah,
they do use the Silicon Valley cookbook as a tool, but not a means to an end. The means to an end is to have a lasting change on something they care about. And the
yeah,
things they care about are, the planet, society, equal opportunities, these kind of
yeah,
issues. And there's a sort of growing wave of entrepreneurs from developing countries and from Europe who are making significant progress with this. And I'm wondering, how could we better connect sort of a public interests with this force these young entrepreneurs can provide? Can we, for example, innovate in regulation?
yeah.
Are there ways to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think how we innovate in regulation is so important, and as I described, this decade coming down the line of regulation, which could stifle innovation because it will end up that those that can only abide by those rules are those who are the bigger players, and that's not fair because we know that. And saying this, I did a call yesterday with two incredible startups who are just kind of addressing the issue about harms and defamation, also addressing the issue about illicit goods, and you're kind of, this is great because what you're doing is you're looking at the pressing problems, seeing some of the things that need to be addressed, and you're providing a solution for that to make a better internet. That's really great. That should be supported, and they're able to do that at the moment in a kind of safe, kind of steady regulatory framework. So I think we have to ensure that the innovation is not lost or not put down by the regulation. So I think it's how do we get these balances right? And at the moment, I think there's a job of work to be done to ensure that innovation is not lost when we're trying to create a better internet, right? So that's something that's in my mind, and how we do things better. And I guess what I was saying before about our strategy at Creative Commons about better sharing, we see that as kind of a way that we are going to have that conversation about how we can do things better. Um, but yeah, there's such energy and enthusiasm and ideas, and we need to capture that. And your point about I've seen a lot of really amazing entrepreneurs in Africa who are doing great things, and where the open data world is pivotal to being able to create these business models that are addressing pressing problems and creating jobs and wealth and a better society that people want to see. So I think there's something there, but maybe it's about how we talk to one another. How is an entrepreneur in Nairobi talking to someone in Berlin today? Well, I'm sure they are, but how do we share that? How do we show best practice? How do we look at how we can learn together? That's really important, and maybe that's something where more government help and working together could really evidence success.
Do you think there's enough traction to, for example, try to harness or get the governments to join forces behind an approach to kind of move the activities and the sort of a public services on the so-called new internet, away from
Yeah,
walled gardens? supported by open source technologies, open content, open data. Do you
Yeah.
think I sense that there's momentum to that direction, but I kind of felt that for almost two decades now,
Almost a
and
decade,
it's
and it's
not a bloody tsunami. So it's
no, it's
it's still that the counter trends are kind of too strong at the moment. Do we believe that there might be a change coming?
I hope there's a change coming. I think there's been talk of change, and there's been incremental steps. I mean, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? And things are changing all the time. And you just look at how open access and sharing research and that's all been so important in this journey. But there's a long way to go, and I do think it's finding those individuals who are your cheerleaders in government, who are going to affect the change both in terms of at the elected political level, but also within the civil service, within people working away, who are not maybe seen, who are doing and seeing the value of this, and supporting those individuals. I guess this is the conversation, the people that are listening today, are part of that picture, and they need to be supported. And also, how do we, maybe there's something there about how, different civil services share information. How do people who are working in local government share best practice of what they are doing to learn from another in an environment where, as you know, finances are always under pressure. And sometimes this world is, what we want to see, and the change that we want to see is it needs to be more prioritized, because that will make the bigger change down the line. But often politics is very short term thinking, and rather than the longer term picture. So
That's a yeah. I looking at the landscape, I'm wondering. Of course, I am biased because I'm originally a city innovation person. So, but I have a feeling that the role of localized but networked way of doing things is growing. I think that the one domain of public entities which is in trouble is kind of a nation states.
yes,
However, the urban innovation is thriving, and
yes,
networked urban innovation, where cities globally join forces to do things better, seems to be thriving as well. And I'm wondering whether there's a chance to kind of, in a way, not bypass the national decision-making systems by things like C40 network of cities, because why I believe that is that cities have a tougher time being very short-sighted, because they feel that they live the crisis. If there's a crisis, you actually have to solve it, because because you impact the life of the citizens. That creates longer-term policies, regardless of the political whimsies. At least it should. And I'm wondering whether we could see a landscape where networks of change makers are the dominant forces. That, in a way, the original internet was developed to some extent back in the day.
I think it's going back, isn't it, maybe to first principles with that, and I do agree with you in the city. I mean, cities are the innovative hubs for regions, as you're experiencing with what your work is doing, your work in Edinburgh. And I think that's just, evidencing that, showing that, illustrating that, and then those, in people, sharing those models. And I know that cities as, hubs of innovation have been there, as for some, you've been at Helsinki, that it's so important to evidence that. But for the future, I do think that, how we can network better, how we can identify change makers, how we can, enthuse and give people the skills that they need to be able to make the change. Because making change is, you're, as somebody described, isn't it? You're the carer of the dying and the midwife of the new. And I think that's something where, how we can support one another for the change that will make the difference to our societies, which will create a better society, a better internet, and a better world.
Very good. Just to put some meat on the bones there, I would be keen to see models where we would indeed use the some of the methods developed by Creative Commons back in the day, for wider policy making. And I think we see platforms and different initiatives already which are starting to do that, collective law writing and experimenting in policy in the city level. That's something I would be keen to see and drive. And I think what will be important there is that it would need to be pan global, that we would have a parallel activities in the US, in Europe, to support that. So I would be keen to join forces to make that
conversation. I think that would be very, very good, Jarmo. And I think that's where, the ideas and innovation come together. And I think it's a really exciting prospect.
Cool. I don't think we really cracked the topic though, because actually we've been discussing digitalization still. Maybe the best. I guess the question, frankly, the starting point of the discussion was a paradox, because in a way, probably the next, what comes after digitalization is the main change will be that we stop talking about it. I mean, we don't discuss electricity. Electricity is a given. I think the same is happening with digitalization. Digitalization will be a given. It won't be a topic to discuss. And what we discuss is what's being done with it. And it's not, hopefully not going to be seen as a force for good or bad in itself, because it is neither. There's certainly it's a tool, and with any tool you can do different things, and hopefully then the balance in the future will be that we do more good than bad with it. Good stuff. We are in 0 minutes.
I know.
What happens next?
I know. I was like, it's cut off.